This video is about parallel budgeting and the policy constraint. It's a practical demonstration using a patient created in previous videos of how service amounts are allocated to policy components as they are created. We're doing this so you can understand the rules of the budgeting engine is using to determine if a patient has coverage or not for service type group or service type group combo. Whereas the previous video centered around patient's policies in tandem budgeting mode, this video is about parallel budgeting, so we'll be changing the patient used an example previously from tandem budgeting to parallel and making similar adjustments to policies to demonstrate parallel budgeting and the policy constraint. We need to mention again, as we do in most videos, this video builds on previous videos. It uses an example of a patient that was created in an earlier video and terminology explained in videos yet previous to that. If you haven't watched those videos, you probably should. If you don't, you'll get much less value out of watching this one, and your time will be poorly spent. Once again, we're logged into Calgo and in location Cassini. We've searched for our example patient, Paige Davis, and are looking at the policy summary for the policies we created previously. We navigate to the policies menu item. The method is very clearly tandem. We'll change this now to parallel. The status message shows that we were successful by pointing out that the budget method has changed to parallel. You'll notice that nothing has changed about the policy summary above. This is because in almost all cases when you change the budgeting method, it's for the purpose of making broad scope changes to the policy information, without which a laying out of policy information in a parallel view would make sense anyway. So we don't update that just because we changed the budgeting method. The next step in making these broad changes is to list the policies and alter their information. We click on List and select the first policy, Self. We recall that it has 3 service type groups. When we click the service type groups menu item from the policies menu of contents, we see a list of the service type groups. They look a little different from their presentation in this list when the budgeting method was tandem. Namely, there is utilization data in the first column, so we'll go through that right now. There is a from, year, month, and day of month value and a to YMD value. This defines an interval. Specifically, it is the interval that the budget calculator is using to determine the amount of coverage that has been used up by the policy component. This next value, as we had set it in the previous video, is an amount limit of $100. The next value after the $100 amount limit per year is the amount that is actually used. It's highlighted red because the budgeting engine is telling you that you're losing money. That is, the utilized amount, which is $130, exceeds the limit within which the treatment plan specifies that service amounts will be paid. The next item in the utilization data indicates the day that the amount limit was exceeded. Those that have watched the previous video will remember that we created a service that took place on June 14th, and it was for $130. So it makes sense that it would indicate that June 14th was the day the limit was exceeded here. The last line in the utilization data is the amount of coverage that remains in the policy component. In the case of the first policy component, the amount is in parentheses, indicating a negative number. So this means that coverage has been exceeded, and in this case exceeded by $30. This makes sense since 130 is exactly 30 larger than 100. The utilization information for the other policy components is easier to read now that we know what each of the lines means. The to value for all 3 components, I should point out because it might not be obvious to you unless you happen to be watching this video on June 15th, 2011, indicates the current year, month, and day of month. This to value will be the current day anytime the stop accumulate YMD value for the policy component is ignored, and the stop accumulate YMD value is ignored if the policy component's field stop accumulate is set to no. If it's set to no, the policy component does not stop accumulating. That is, it will continue to accumulate service amounts and post it, if appropriate, against its limit all the way from the beginning of the component through to today. We'll talk more about start and stop accumulate YMD values soon. The next field of the policy components is the name. The name that appears here is the name of the service type group, or combo that was selected for the component. Clicking on the name allows us to edit the fields of the policy component, including changing the service type group, or combo. We won't do that yet. We'll go through some more fields first. We'll skip the renewal interval for discussion another time. The renewal year, month, and day of month are synonymous with start. These fields are labeled renewal because of one property of the renewal year value, which is this. If you set the renewal year to 0, then the budget calculator will assume the renewal year is the most recent year of the renewal month and day of month. For example, if the renewal month and day of month are 3 and 1 respectively, meaning March 1, the most recent occurrence of March 1, when today is June 15, 2011, is March 1, 2011. However, if today is February 14th, 2011, the most recent occurrence of March 1 is March 1, 2010. If you didn't get that, you should rewind the video to when I started talking about renewal year being set to 0 and do whatever you have to do to really understand it, because it's pretty important for you to get it later when we talk about where the service amounts go. We'll wait while you do that. Okay, you're back. Moving on. The renewal year, month, and day of month, whether the year is the most recent year for the month and day of month, or the year is a specified year, month, and day of month, indicates to the budgeting calculator that for that policy component, it should start counting service amounts for services that occur on or after it. The stop accumulate yes no indicator tells the budget calculator to ignore the stop accumulate YMD when set to no. If set to Y for yes, the budget calculator checks to see if the service amount that you created should have its amount considered in the policy component's utilization. If the service occurs prior to the stop accumulate YMD, its amount is considered. If it occurs on or after, the service amount is not considered. The quantity per year specifies, in the case of the first policy component, the limit on the number of chiropractic assessments per coverage year, or coverage interval. The amount limit per year you already know about, so we'll skip that. The minimum weekly amount limit per visit, the amount limit per pair or each are ignored by the budgeting engine. They are for reference only, as is the estimate field. The percent coverage per visit field, you've seen it in action in a previous video. It has the same function here, as we'll demonstrate soon. All other fields in the policy component are ignored and are provided for reference only, except for the prescribed by field. This field accepts a document type. There are many document types that have accumulated over time in the system. You'll know them familiarly as for example, a doctor's prescription, or a letter from MD, or an explanation of benefits, or coverage explanation, etc. The most documents don't make sense to enter in this field. What you will find yourself entering here are document types like MD prescription for orthotics, MD prescription for physiotherapy, etc. The reason why you would enter document types into a policy component is to increase the likelihood that a document of the specified type has been attached to the patient electronically in Coligo. This is to manage the risk clinically and financially that comes from treating a patient that doesn't have a prescription for the treatment. That is, if you specify a document like an MD prescription for physiotherapy and no such document has actually been loaded up into the patient, with the policy constraints turned on, it won't let you bill for services that are referred to by that policy component. We'll review how to use that field later. For now, let's make some changes to the policies and watch where the dollars fall. We'll do this in the next video. Make sure you catch that one.